You know what's terrifying? Most modern homes can become unlivable within a single winter night if the power goes out. I'm serious. One blizzard, one frozen gas line, one collapsed electrical grid, and suddenly people surrounded by expensive furniture and giant televisions are huddled under blankets watching their breath turn white indoors. But centuries before modern heating systems existed, Russian families survived winters so brutal they could freeze exposed skin in under a minute, while using shockingly small amounts of firewood. And the reason sounds almost impossible at first. Their stoves were designed less like fireplaces, and more like thermal weapons against winter itself. Here's the thing nobody tells you about heat. Creating it is only half the battle. Keeping it alive is where survival begins. Most fireplaces are horribly inefficient because they burn wood fast and dump enormous amounts of heat directly out of the chimney. You see giant flames and think the room must be getting warmer, but a huge percentage of that energy escapes into the sky like burning money. Traditional Russian stoves attacked the problem differently. Instead of chasing endless flames, they trapped heat inside massive brick structures that acted like giant rechargeable batteries. One hard burn could heat the bricks for hours, sometimes an entire day, long after the fire itself had died. Think about the psychological difference there. In a modern survival scenario, you're constantly feeding a hungry stove, terrified the fire will go out while snow piles against the windows. But with a Russian stove, the heat stays with you. The walls themselves begin radiating warmth back into the room slowly and steadily like stored sunlight. And in real winter survival, steady warmth is more important than dramatic warmth. A burst of extreme heat followed by freezing temperatures destroys comfort, burns fuel rapidly and forces constant labor. Stable radiant heat keeps people alive. The real genius was hidden inside the stove where nobody could see it. Most chimneys let hot smoke escape immediately, which wastes an unbelievable amount of thermal energy. Russian stoves forced smoke through long, winding internal channels built deep into the masonry before it finally escaped outside. Imagine hot exhaust being trapped inside a maze of brick tunnels while every possible degree of heat gets absorbed into the structure. By the time smoke reached the chimney exit, much of its energy had already been stolen and stored inside the stove itself. It's basically a primitive heat exchange system invented long before modern engineering textbooks existed. And the physics behind it is ruthless. Hot gases naturally transfer thermal energy into cooler, dense materials like brick and stone. The more surface area the smoke touches, the more heat gets harvested before leaving the house. That means fewer logs burned, fewer trips into dangerous snowstorms for fuel, and less energy wasted. In survival situations, efficiency isn't a luxury. It's the difference between lasting until spring or running out of wood halfway through January. And here's where things become almost uncomfortable for modern people. Traditional Russian homes were designed around the stove because winter dictated architecture. The stove often sat near the center of the house like a giant warm heart pumping heat outward into every room. Families cooked on it, dried wet clothes beside it, warmed water with it, and in many cases literally slept on top of it. That sounds primitive until you understand what sub-zero survival actually feels like. Cold changes human behavior. It slows thinking, weakens judgment, destroys morale. If you've never spent hours shivering uncontrollably, you don't realize how quickly the brain begins making desperate decisions. A warm, elevated sleeping platform above a masonry stove wasn't some quirky tradition. It was biological protection. The upper brick stayed warm through the night because thermal mass releases energy slowly. Children slept there. Elderly people slept there. Sick people recovered there. During blizzards, the safest place in the entire building was often directly on top of the stove itself. And honestly, there's something darkly intelligent about that. The same fire that cooked your food became your bed heater, your clothing dryer, your water heater, and your winter survival system all at once. Every calorie of wood performed multiple jobs. That's real efficiency. Modern houses often fail because they depend entirely on uninterrupted infrastructure. Electricity fails, everything fails. But Russian stove systems were built for resilience long before that word became trendy. Thick masonry doesn't care about power outages. It doesn't care about frozen pipelines or collapsing utility networks. Once heated, it simply continues radiating warmth silently for hours. And because the heat was radiant instead of forced air, the experience felt completely different. Radiant heat warms objects and surfaces directly instead of just blowing warm air around temporarily. Walls warm up. Floors warm up. Bedding warms up. Even the human body absorbs heat differently under radiant energy. That's one reason people often describe masonry-heated rooms as feeling deeply comfortable rather than aggressively hot. Your body isn't fighting constant cold drafts. It exists inside a stable thermal environment. In survival psychology, stability matters more than people think. Panic grows when temperatures fluctuate violently, but steady warmth calms the nervous system. It slows fear. It allows clearer thinking during disasters. Another thing nobody talks about is fuel labor. Firewood is brutally heavy. During deep winter, collecting enough wood to survive can consume massive amounts of physical energy, especially in snow-covered environments. Traditional Russian heating systems evolved under conditions where every wasted log meant more labor tomorrow, and labor in freezing conditions burns calories fast. That's why efficient combustion became so important. Russian stoves often burned wood extremely hot for short periods instead of smoldering weakly all day. Hot combustion extracts more usable energy from the wood and burns gases more completely. Cleaner combustion means less smoke, less creosote buildup, and better fuel efficiency overall. Modern survival manuals still teach similar principles because combustion physics hasn't changed. Small hot fires used intelligently often outperform lazy smoky fires that consume fuel endlessly while producing surprisingly little useful heat. Russian stove builders understood this long before thermodynamics had a name. And then there's insulation, the silent survival multiplier, hiding behind everything. Traditional Russian homes were usually smaller and more enclosed than modern open-concept houses because retaining heat was more important than visual spaciousness. Huge empty rooms are nightmares during power outages because heat spreads thin and disappears quickly. Russian homes concentrated warmth into manageable spaces that could actually be defended against winter. Lower ceilings trapped heat better. Thick walls reduced thermal loss. Windows were smaller because glass leaks enormous amounts of heat compared to insulated walls. Every design decision came from centuries of brutal environmental feedback. If a heating method wasted fuel, people froze. If a building leaked too much heat, families suffered. Winter punished bad engineering immediately. Over generations, only the systems that conserved energy survived culturally. That's why these stoves seem almost unnaturally efficient today. They were refined through survival pressure most modern people never experience.